Thank you for staying with us. We've been having a conversation before we went on the break with the Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola. I was just giving us an update on how far the government has come with regards to issues bordering on his ministry. And before we went on the break, he was speaking on insecurity and its challenge on some of this development that government has made. And I think Sam wanted to ask a question too.
Yes. I want to know, you're talking about financial responsibility, especially with some of the projects that have been abandoned for a long time, contracts awarded 2-3 times. And is there going to be a reckoning eventually about what happened to that money? And also reckoning with all those who have tax credits. Is there a supervision of the monies they are spending on the projects to see if they're actually faithful to their pledges?
Okay, let me deal with the first one, contracts that were not performed. You see, what I tell people is that human activity never evaporates, and it never disappears. The footfalls and the prints are always there for any diligent investigation. But I am sure that if we told Nigerians that we were busy investigating the failed Bodo Boni contracts, that's why we haven't built it. That is not what they want to hear. It is service first that they want to see. And you will see some of that commentary when this government started in 2015, trying to recover some funds that had been diverted from the public till for electoral purposes. And the list was as long as anybody's arm. And after a while, the sensibility that you are getting, but I think that those things don't disappear. Now, the other part of your question about the NMPC, the tax credits generally, the comfort that I believe you should have is that because those monies that they use are the taxes that they ought to pay, all we are asking them to do is pay them in advance. So essentially, it is government revenue. So those roads are Nigerian roads. And the process that leads them to the award of a contract, for example, is the same process that we use when we are funding the program from budget. We go through the Bureau of Public Procurement, which is the government's statutory price advisor. So you cannot use a tax credit unless the BPP says, I am satisfied with this price, if you understand what I mean. So it's the same process that we go through, that they go through. And then the tax verification is such that there's a bandwidth of how much you can spend as tax, so that all your tax liabilities don't then go to a road. You must still pay some for each year into government revenue. And that is being done through a checks and balance system. We certify that work of X value has been done. Payment is then also counter-approved by the Ministry of Finance, verified and finally authenticated with a tax certificate by FIRS. So there's a governance process around it. You can't just get up and say, I'm going to build the road, then I've spent X naira, come and give me back. No, that's not how it happens.
Yeah, but let's also look at what's your assessment on the, will I say, the growth or the increase of Chinese-funded infrastructure projects in the country. One of them is the Lagos-Ibadan project, which is ongoing. How would you weigh the impact as against the options from the West regarding meeting Nigeria's financing needs? And on the other hand, there is also the concern of, Nigeria not getting the shorter end of the stick by utilizing this foreign funding options.
So first of all, I would like to have a more detailed conversation based on verifiable facts about this hype about Chinese funding and Chinese this and Chinese that. I would like to have a more detailed and rigorous conversation about it. Let me also press the button for you to remind you that in my ministry, there are currently only 2 Chinese-funded contracts. Only 2. And let me say for the record that contrary to your opening statement, there is no Chinese funding on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, not 1 kobo. Let me repeat that there is no 1 kobo on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway from China funds or anything of the like. So let me be clear about those things. But the 2 Chinese-funded projects that I have in my ministry are the Akwanga, Kefi, Lafia, Makurdi Highway and the Makurdi 9th Mile Enugu Highway. These contracts had been signed by the previous administration before Buhari was elected. So let me repeat that. These contracts that are China loans have been signed before the Buhari government came into office. But there were still conditionalities like the award of the actual contract, because there are usually 2 contracts, the financing contract and the construction contract. And that's why I say I would like to have a more detailed conversation, because I think a lot of fear is being built. Most of China's funds come from its Export-Import Bank. EXIM is the acronym for it. Nigeria also has an EXIM bank. And I'm sure that later in the life of Nigeria, because I'm sure Nigeria will become a very rich nation. Currently, its Export-Import Bank is being used for agric only. In the fullness of time, Nigeria will be a country that will then be of some concern. Oh, Nigeria is lending money to this, financing this. But America has an Exim Bank. So many big countries, big economies have export-import. They use it to grow international trade. So there is really nothing to lose anybody's head about, in my own view. I have heard the concerns about, oh, you are borrowing too much. There's always a concern about borrowing. The question is, what are you borrowing against? What is your plan to pay? What is the alternative to borrowing? Is it to increase taxation? And I've said to people, if you don't want borrowing, let us have a debate. What's the alternative? Where is the money coming from? Or should we stop the projects? In which case, our conditions and our pay will continue. Well, those are conversations for another time. I have seen some of those agreements, and in my own view, and this is me wearing my cap as a legal practitioner, I've seen those things. They are not onerous conditions. The terms for repayment and the tenure of the loan give you a longer time to pay. They are not priced as commercial loans. And then the Chinese Exim model requires that you, the borrowing party, must also commit your money. So it's not just take money. Commit is like a counterpart funding to ensure that the service and the infrastructure is being delivered. And these are important things that we must bear in mind.
Right. Let's get some specifics with some routes now, especially the east-west road that the president has said is dear to him. How far have we come with that particular route?
Okay, let me say again that sometime in the life of the previous administration, in the wisdom of the former president, the East-West Road was taken away from the Ministry of Works and transferred to the then newly created Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs. So in the last 7 years, the Ministry of Works under me had nothing to do with the East-West Road, nothing. It was this year that I got a letter from the president authorizing my ministry to take over the East-West Road this year. I can't quite remember the month now. And in that process, we must do due diligence. First is to do a proper transfer. So the Minister for the Niger Delta Affairs, my colleague Godswill Akpabio, then communicated to me. There was a formal public ceremony of a handing over, but it doesn't end there. If you say that you have transferred the road to us in condition A verification process of those conditions must now take place on site. So we have finished that process. We are satisfied with what they say they have done and where they say they handed over to us, because there are financial consequences for that. And the next level is to transfer equipment, staff who were working on that road where necessary, to transfer files, to also transfer vehicles and all of the project machinery. That has also been completed. Now that that is completed, we need to do some revision of pricing, because the East-West Road has been under construction for well over a decade or more. So prices have moved, conditions have changed. The Eleme Port Harcourt junction is the real point of pain. So we are now waiting for the Bureau of Public Procurement to approve the proposed price changes and all of that, because a lot of relocation has to be done at that junction, the very, very critical economic junction for the people of the Niger Delta and for Nigeria in terms of the supply network to the port, Eleme, and all of that. So that is where we are now. If we get those approvals, then we go back to the Federal Executive Council to get authorization to expend how much has been certified by BPP. Then the next hurdle is, where is the money coming from? But there are positive news fillers that I get around there. So this is what it takes to build a road. The governance process has to be done. And you remember Sam himself said, look, how are we sure that the tax credit money is being properly spent? This is what we must go through in order to then do our work.
Well, infrastructure is a very important political high point. Going towards 2023, how well do you want to position infrastructure for your party going forward?
Okay, what I do every year with regards to infrastructure is to go back to the people from time to time and say, how is it this year? How long, for example, is your journey time when you travel this year? And the report I have got year on year is that, oh, our journey time is better this year than last year, because it's not a light bulb switch. It's a very, very well coordinated, progressive journey. Building roads, for example, kilometer after kilometer until you finish, say, like a Lagos-Ibadan, 127 kilometers of dual carriageway. That's not something you do overnight. Or the Abuja to Kano, 375 kilometers of dual carriageway. But as you progress, you begin to feel. And so we have enough feedback, not what we say, what the people who use the road are saying. That, oh, I used to spend 3 hours on this road. I now spend 1 hour. That's the economic impact. Because first of all, cost of travel is reduced. Time spent in travel is reduced. That savings in time can be turned to other productive activities. And that is why I opened my intervention here, that you cannot isolate a conversation of infrastructure from the economy. President Buhari didn't campaign on infrastructure. He campaigned on the economy. So this is a driver of the economy. In all places where we have built roads, for example, what the surveys show us is that the land values across the adjoining areas have increased by up to 30 or 40%. Those lands don't belong to federal government. They are individual, communal, corporate lands. So those are value asset improvement, capitalization of assets, if you like. So they are richer because they can raise more money with the increased value of their land. And you can experiment with this in a neighborhood where there's no road to your house. And when a road is built, your landlord is going to increase rent. That rent goes to his pocket. That's part of wealth creation. So, and you can also drill down the supply chain. On one project, I think it was the section of the Lagos-Ibadan, when I asked the contractor to tell me how many suppliers he was using, because all the diesel granite, sharp sand, crushed stone, cement, reinforcement, water supply, lubricants are supplied by people, not the contractor. He was using 145 different suppliers. So those are all the small business owned by people, maybe some oil, some lubricants, some granite, and all of those things. And this is how
I will take you up
infrastructure
on
begins
those.
to touch the lives, the lives of people. So it's a very, very extensive intervention that connects people, some of who I will never meet, but who benefited from it.